I wasn't looking for anything when I walked into the cafe that morning. I never am. It's the kind of place that smells faintly of burnt toast and cinnamon, always playing music too soft to name. I go because it's quiet, and because no one expects anything of me there. She was already at the counter, digging through her purse for change. I recognized her, not in the way you recognize someone famous, but in the way you start to notice a face that appears often enough to feel familiar. She lived across the hall from me. We'd exchanged nods in the hallway, a mumbled evening or morning, nothing more. But here she was, in the soft cafe light, ordering coffee like the world revolved around this small ritual. Large latte, extra hot. Her voice carried a calm precision, as if she always knew exactly what she wanted. When it was my turn, I asked for the usual. Black coffee, 1 sugar. The barista smirked. The neighbor special. I hadn't realized she was still standing close enough to hear. She turned slightly, her eyes flicking toward me. Noticing. You live across from me, don't you? She said. I nodded, adjusting the strap of my backpack like it might anchor me. Yeah. 3rd floor. Thought so. She didn't smile, not fully, more like a shadow of one. You keep odd hours. Sorry. The words slipped out before I thought. She shook her head, brushing hair away from her face. Not a complaint. Just noticed. That word stuck with me. Noticed. We ended up at separate tables. She opened a book, glasses sliding low on her nose. I sat by the window, pretending to read emails on my phone, but the words blurred. My thumb hovered over a draft message I'd written the night before. You still awake? It wasn't even addressed to anyone. Just there, like a habit of trying, then deleting. Her coffee came out before mine. She carried it back with careful hands, setting it down beside her open book. Steam curled upward, fogging her glasses for a second. She smiled at herself and wiped them with a napkin, folding it into neat squares afterward. I don't know why I noticed that. Maybe because it felt so deliberate, like even the smallest things mattered to her. When my coffee arrived, she looked up as if she'd been waiting. Black coffee, she said. Simple. I raised my cup slightly. Guilty. For a second, it felt like we were the only 2 people in the room. Just 2 neighbors sharing nothing more than caffeine and a thin line of conversation. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it for too long without answering. Her thumb hovered, then retreated. She closed the screen, slid the phone face down, and exhaled like she'd put something heavy aside. I wanted to ask. I didn't. Instead, I said, you read a lot. Trying to, she murmured. She turned the book so I could see the title. I didn't recognize it. Something about memory and loss. You'd probably find it boring, she added. Maybe. I sipped my coffee, heat pressing against my lip. But you don't seem bored. That made her look at me. Really look. Not through me, not past me, but at me. Her gaze lingered long enough that I had to look away, tracing the rim of my cup with my finger. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, as if testing the space between us. You're not ready for what I want. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't flirtation either. More like a truth she let slip without meaning to. By the time I looked up, she'd gone back to her book. Pages turned, coffee cooled. The silence stretched too long. Later, when I got back to my apartment, there was a text on my phone. Next time, don't sit so far away. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering the way hers had in the cafe. And I didn't delete this one. Her text stayed on my phone all day. I didn't answer it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what answering would mean. By evening, though, I heard her door open across the hall, the faint sound of keys on the counter, the low thud of shoes kicked off. Something in me moved before I could stop it. I stepped out, pretending to check my mailbox, even though I'd already emptied it that morning. She was locking her door again when she saw me. Long day. I shrugged. Not really. You. Always, she said, then studied me for a second. You didn't text back. I flushed, caught. Didn't know what to say. You could have just said next time. She gave a small half smile, softer than the one at the cafe. Then she pushed open her door and, after a pause, added, You can come in, if you're not busy. Her apartment smelled faintly of chamomile tea and something floral I couldn't place. It looked lived in, stacks of books by the couch, a blanket folded on the armrest, an unfinished crossword left on the coffee table. "Tea?" she asked, already reaching for the kettle. "Sure." I sat down, careful to keep my hands on my knees. She moved around the kitchen with a kind of ease I envied. Not rushing, not second-guessing herself. Just steady. She set the mugs down, one in front of me. When I reached for it, our fingers brushed. I pulled back too quickly, heat rushing to my face. She noticed. She always seemed to notice. "You're quiet," she said, settling across from me. "I'm not great at this." "This?" I gestured vaguely. "Conversations that matter." Her gaze softened. She lifted her tea, blowing on it before taking a slow sip. "You don't have to be great at it. Just honest." The words sat heavy between us. I thought of saying something light, something safe. But what came out was, "I don't think anyone really waits for me. Not in the way that matters." It surprised even me. I don't know why I admitted it. Her eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. She set her mug down carefully, fingers tapping once against the ceramic. "You'd be surprised," she said quietly. For a while we just sat there, the hum of the kettle cooling filling the silence. She shifted slightly, curling one leg under her, looking more at ease in her own space than I'd ever felt in mine. "I was married once," she said suddenly. "Did you know that?" I shook my head. "Divorced 10 years now. He moved to another city. Remarried. Sometimes I think I miss him, but mostly I think I just miss having someone to come home to." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded, holding her words like they might break if I set them down too quickly. The age difference, the unspoken neighbor boundary, the risk of being seen, it all pressed at the edges of my mind. And yet, sitting there, all I could think was how natural it felt. How dangerously natural. At some point, she reached for the remote and turned off the lamp beside us. The room fell into softer light, shadows stretching across the floor. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. I said, "Thanks for the tea." She leaned against the doorframe, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of chamomile on her breath. "You're welcome," she said. And then, without really meaning to, she reached out and fixed the collar of my shirt. Just a small, ordinary gesture. But her fingers lingered a beat too long. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even a promise. But it felt like something I wouldn't be able to forget. For the next week, I kept finding reasons to pass her door. Not knocking. Not even slowing down. Just listening for movement. A kettle whistling, a drawer shutting, the soft scrape of her chair against the floor. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see the thin strip of light under her door. I'd stand in my own dark hallway a little too long, as if the space between us might somehow shorten. But I never knocked. The next time I saw her was by accident. Laundry room, basement level. The air smelled like detergent and dust. She was pulling sheets out of a dryer when I walked in, arms loaded with clothes. "Oh," she said, half laughing, brushing hair from her face. "Didn't think anyone else used this room." I dropped my basket harder than I meant to. Socks spilled across the floor. Guess we're both old-fashioned. She bent to help, fingers grazing mine when we reached for the same shirt. Too quick, too sharp. We both pulled back. For a moment, all I could hear was the low thrum of another machine, the hum of pipes. She folded her sheets with careful precision. I stuffed my clothes in without looking. "You're avoiding me," she said finally. I froze. "I'm not. You didn't answer my text for 3 days." I swallowed. "I didn't know if you meant it." Her hands stilled, a sheet half folded. "I don't say things I don't mean." That should have calmed me, but it only made the air tighter. I wanted to ask what exactly did you mean then? But the words jammed in my throat. Before I could try again, the door creaked open. A guy from upstairs came in, earbuds dangling, giving us both a distracted nod. He shoved his clothes into a washer, humming off-key, oblivious. She stepped back, voice lower now. "See? This is why." "Why what?" She shook her head, lips pressed thin. "Never mind." She gathered her folded sheets, clutching them like armor. I stood there, staring at the machines turning, turning, turning. By the time I looked up, she was already at the door. "Wait," I said, too loud in the hollow room. She paused, half-turned. I wanted to say it, that I hadn't stopped thinking about her, that I couldn't read her signals, that I was scared of being too young, too reckless, not enough. But none of that came out. Instead, you forgot this. I held up a stray pillowcase. She crossed the room slowly, taking it from me. Her fingers brushed mine again, slower this time, almost deliberate. She looked at me as if weighing something. Careful, she whispered. Then she left. That night, I found myself at her door. Not knocking, not even close enough to. Just standing there, hand half raised. I heard movement inside, the shuffle of a chair, the faint sound of water running. I turned to leave, but the door opened before I could. She stood there barefoot, hair down, no makeup. Just her. You were about to knock, she said softly. I didn't answer. Couldn't. She leaned against the frame, studying me. My chest was tight, words caught between wanting and fear. For a moment, she closed the space. Just a step. The kind of closeness where breath mingles. Her hand lifted slightly, like she might touch my face. But she stopped. A fraction away. You're not ready, she murmured again. And then she stepped back, leaving the doorway open but the distance wider than ever. We crossed paths again on a Sunday evening. The street outside our building smelled faintly of rain, the kind that never quite fell but left the air heavy. She was sitting on the low bench near the entrance, jacket pulled tight, watching the last of the daylight fade. I almost kept walking, but she looked up when she heard my footsteps, and there was no way to pretend I hadn't seen her. Out late, she said, just clearing my head. I gestured vaguely toward nowhere. You? Same. I sat down beside her, though not too close. The bench was long, wide enough for two strangers to keep their boundaries. But we weren't strangers anymore, and the space between us felt deliberate, sharp-edged. We didn't talk at first. Just sat there, listening to the occasional hiss of a car passing by, the far-off clatter of someone dragging a garbage can. You don't make things easy, she said suddenly. I glanced over. Me? Yes, you. She pulled her jacket tighter, as if bracing. You linger in hallways. You stare too long. And then you act like you don't want to be here. I swallowed. I do want to be here. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. Then why do you keep hesitating? Because I was 20-something and she wasn't. Because the whole thing felt like standing on a frozen lake, listening for cracks. Because I wanted more than I knew how to admit. I don't know what you want, I said finally. Silence. She leaned back against the bench, looking up at the faint outline of clouds. You think I want some kind of game? Her voice was low. That I enjoy complicating this. I don't know. My voice caught. Maybe I'm afraid to find out. She exhaled sharply, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. You're not the only one afraid. The words settled deep. I turned toward her, searching her face for something. Permission, maybe. She kept her gaze forward, jaw tight. What are you afraid of? I asked. Her hand tightened around the edge of her jacket. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then, quietly, of being seen, and of you looking away once you do. That undid me more than anything. The idea that she could be afraid of me, of my leaving, when I could barely stand not being near her. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Too fast, too certain. She finally looked at me. Her eyes lingered, heavy, searching. I wanted to say more, to tell her how every silence between us carried more weight than any conversation I'd ever had. How the small things, the folded napkin, the fixed collar, the text that said don't sit so far away, had started to feel like anchors. But all I managed was, I noticed things too. Her lips parted, a question forming but not spoken. Before I could lose the nerve, I added, like the way you fold everything into neat squares. Or how you let your coffee go cold because you get lost in a book. Or how you touch your necklace when you're holding something back. Her hand flew instinctively to her collarbone, where the silver chain rested. The gesture gave her away. We sat there, caught in that raw space where neither of us could retreat without losing something. You shouldn't, she started, then stopped. Her voice faltered. You're too young. I whispered. She didn't answer. The silence pressed in, thick and alive. Her hand dropped from her necklace, resting on the bench between us. Close, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the possibility vibrating in the air. And just when I thought the space would break, she asked the question so softly I almost missed it. What happens if we don't stop? The morning after the bench, I half expected a text. Something simple like coffee, or even a single word, next. But my phone stayed quiet. 2 days passed, then 3. Her door stayed closed, blinds drawn. I heard her sometimes, the low clink of dishes, the muffled scrape of furniture being moved. But she didn't appear in the hall. I started timing my comings and goings to accidentally run into her. Nothing. The absence became louder than presence. On the 4th night, I found myself walking past the cafe where we'd first sat across from each other. The place glowed warm against the cool evening, but she wasn't there. Instead, I caught a glimpse of her in the window of another restaurant across the street, sitting with a man. Gray hair, neat shirt, older, steady-looking. He leaned toward her, and she laughed, not loudly, but enough that it reached me through glass. I froze on the sidewalk. Didn't move until the traffic light changed and people brushed past me. By the time I found air again, she was gathering her things, slipping her necklace back into place like armor. I didn't go in. I walked home, each step too loud, my chest too tight. The next day, she was at her door when I came out with my trash. She nodded politely, as if we'd never shared tea, never whispered in doorways, never let silences stretch too long. "Morning," she said. I opened my mouth to answer, but only managed. "Yeah." Her eyes softened, maybe a flicker of recognition, or maybe just pity. She carried her mail inside, shutting the door gently. I wanted to knock. Instead, I sat on the floor outside my apartment, scrolling through messages I'd never sent. One draft read, "Who was he?" Another, "Did I do something wrong?" None of them made it past my thumb hovering over send. That evening, I finally heard her door again. Voices. A man's laugh, the same from the restaurant. For a second, I thought about pressing my ear to the wall like some cliché, but I didn't. I just sat in the dark, lights off, listening to footsteps moving inside her apartment. Hours later, when silence returned, I stood outside her door. The hallway smelled faintly of her perfume. I raised my hand, knuckles almost grazing the wood. But I didn't knock. Instead, I whispered it under my breath, as if the door might somehow carry the words through. "Why did you let me notice you?" Then I went back inside, shut my own door, and sat on the edge of my bed with the phone glowing in my hand. The unsent text stared back at me. "Next time, don't sit so far away." I typed a reply I'd wanted to send weeks ago. "I won't." But I didn't hit send. I just let the screen dim until the words disappeared. And for the first time, I understood something I couldn't name until it sat like stone in my chest. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when the knock came. Soft, almost hesitant. The kind of sound you could pretend not to hear. I opened the door anyway, and there she was, hair tied back, jacket half-zipped, eyes tired but sharp. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. She stepped past, into the dim light of my apartment, like she'd already decided something. I closed the door slowly. "I didn't think you don't." She shook her head, cutting me off. Her hands were stuffed in her pockets, shoulders drawn tight. She paced once, then stopped near my kitchen counter, resting against it like she needed something solid under her. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence buzzed, loud as anything. "Finally," she said, "that man you saw me with. He's not what you think." I stayed still, waiting. "He's my ex-husband." She exhaled, pressing a hand to her forehead. "He came by to talk. About money, about the past, about things that don't matter anymore." But I didn't. I didn't correct your assumption. Her voice cracked just slightly, but she steadied it. "Maybe I wanted to see if you'd walk away." I swallowed hard. "And if I had?" She looked at me then, really looked. "Then I'd know you weren't ready." The words landed heavy, familiar, circling back to every time she'd said them before. I leaned against the wall, arms folded tight. And now, her fingers toyed with her necklace, like they always did when she was holding something back. But this time she let her hand fall, unclasped. "Now I'm the one who's not sure I'm ready." That stung, sharper than I expected. I wanted to say something easy, that age didn't matter, that I didn't care who she used to love, that I wasn't going anywhere. But it wasn't that simple. "You think I don't feel the gap?" I asked quietly. "Every time I knock, every time I don't. I know what people would say. I know what it looks like. Her eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. She let the words hang. I don't need certainty, I added, voice low. I just need something real. Even if it's only here, only now. She closed her eyes for a beat, like the weight of that nearly tipped her over. When she opened them again, she stepped forward. Not all the way, not dramatic. Just close enough that the space between us finally shrank. Her hand lifted, slow, deliberate. She didn't touch my face or grab my arm. She just rested her palm flat against my chest, right over my heart. The heat of it was enough to undo me. You scare me, she whispered. Same, I said. We stood there, her hand against me, my breath caught. No declarations. No promises. Just the raw admission that this mattered more than either of us wanted to admit. After a long moment, I covered her hand with mine. Not pulling her closer. Just holding it there, steady, like I could anchor both of us. She gave the smallest smile, the kind you might miss if you weren't looking right at her. Okay, she said. And that was enough. Time didn't rush us. It unfolded slowly, the way mornings turn into afternoons without anyone noticing. Weeks passed. The hallway between our doors stopped feeling like a line I wasn't supposed to cross. Some days we shared nothing more than a nod on our way out. Other days, she'd tap gently on my door and say, "Tea?" And I'd follow her in like it was the most natural thing in the world. The tension shifted. It didn't disappear. It softened, settled into something that no longer felt like a storm waiting to break. One evening, I came home later than usual. The clock in the lobby read 8:47 p.m. exactly. She was sitting on the same bench outside, jacket tucked close, watching the glow of streetlights. I sat beside her without asking. This time, I didn't leave space between us. You still fold everything into squares, I teased, nodding at the stack of laundry beside her. She gave me a look, half amused, half exasperated. And you still let your coffee go cold. Not always. Mostly. We let the quiet stretch, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable, like we'd earned the right not to fill every silence. She leaned back, sighing softly. You're still too young. I turned toward her, voice even. Maybe. But I'm here. She didn't argue this time. Her hand slipped against mine on the bench, not dramatic, not even intentional at first. Just there. When she didn't pull away, neither did I. Life didn't transform overnight. She still worked long hours. I still lost myself in routines that didn't always make sense. We never announced anything, never tried to explain ourselves to curious neighbors. But in small ways, we carved out something steady. She kept a second mug on her counter, always ready for black coffee. I learned to keep chamomile stocked in my cabinet. She started leaving books by my door when she finished them. Novels about memory, about loss, about how people endure. I always returned them with folded notes tucked inside, scribbled thoughts in the margins. Sometimes she'd knock on my door at odd hours, carrying nothing but quiet. We'd sit in the kitchen, bare light bulb humming above, steam curling from our mugs. No grand conversations, just presence. Other nights, I'd hear her moving in the hallway, and when I opened my door, she'd be there, leaning against the frame. No words necessary, just a soft, "You're awake," and the rest would fall into place. One Saturday, we ended up at the cafe again. Same place, same smell of cinnamon and burnt toast. She ordered her usual, large latte, extra hot. I ordered mine, black coffee, 1 sugar. The barista smirked, just like before. The neighbor special. This time, she smiled. Really smiled. We sat at the window, mugs cooling between us. She watched the street, people hurrying past with umbrellas, and said, almost to herself, "You remember the first thing I told you?" I nodded. "You're not ready for what I want." Her eyes flicked to mine, softer than I'd ever seen them. And I thought about it. About nights standing in hallways, about unsent texts, about the way silence had carried us here. "I think I was ready," I said. "Just didn't know it yet." She didn't laugh. She didn't correct me. She just reached across the table, tapping her finger once against my hand. Light, almost nothing. But it was everything. Later, back at our building, we passed the bench where it had all unraveled and begun again. She paused, looking at it for a long moment. "Funny," she murmured. How a place remembers more than people think. I followed her gaze, then looked back at her. Then let's make it remember something better. She tilted her head, considering. And then she smiled. Small, quiet, but real. Okay, she said. And that was the sentence finally finished. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Share your thoughts. Your idea could inspire the next one.